All right, let's go ahead. Sorry.
Commissioner Odero,
Yes.
Commissioner Kasher,
Here.
Commissioner Wasserman,
Here.
Commissioner Nguyen,
Yes.
Chair Remke.
Here. Good morning. I'd like to start by welcoming our new commissioner, Commissioner Maria Odero. We're really excited to have her. As most of you probably read, she's a partner in the employment law practice at Paul Hastings and co-chair of the employment law department in the Los Angeles office. And so welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, before we get started with the items on the agenda, is there any public comment regarding an item not on the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, we'll jump right in then. The approval of the September commission meetings. Are there any comments from the commissioners or corrections or issues? No? Oh, okay.
Well,
There was one, did you want to reflect that you left the room?
I thought I did, but
It reflects that you didn't participate, but
Madam Chair, I had noticed that that the minutes reflected that you did not participate in the discussion. At least in my experience, usually I put something in that the person that left the room and did not participate in the matter at all, to reflect also the fact that you weren't involved in the vote.
maybe we're
It says-
reading a different one. It says, and left the hearing room during the discussion of the item.
If you think that's clear enough.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Thank you, though. Do you think it's adequate enough?
It was your recusal, so it's not-
All right, I'll take the fall. Okay, any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the September minutes.
Commissioner Odero? You can abstain too.
Okay, so yes.
Commissioner Kasher,
Yes.
Oh,
Commissioner
that-
Wasserman,
that's fine.
Yes.
Commissioner Nguyen,
yes.
Chair Remke.
Yes.
This motion passes.
Okay. All right, so next we have the proposed consent calendar, items 3 through 63. Before we get started, are there any, excuse me, any items that a commissioner would like to have pulled from the consent? Commissioner Wasserman?
Item 4, please.
Okay. Any others?
I don't want to pull items, but I did have a couple of comments.
Let's go.
Okay, so items 17 through 21 all involved the same Ora Loma Water District. And I was just concerned about that many individuals failing to file. And I just wanted to make on the record, a comment about, I hope we will do some training on that to make sure that we don't catch people flat-footed or unawares.
Galena West, Chief of Enforcement. That was a great point, and something that I wanted to express to the commission anyway was something that has been coming up with the $50 fee issues and also with non-filing is we've found city clerks and county clerks, filing officers who maybe haven't gotten the training that they need in order to do their jobs in the best manner. So we have been working with technical assistants, and Trish in particular, and technical assistants to refer those clerks to technical assistants to have them reach out for trainings. And so that's something we've been doing with the $50 fee clerks as well. And I also want to say thank you to all of those clerks, because as we clean up all of these old cases, it's a lot of them that are having to take the time to go through their records to see who needs to be cleaned up. And so a lot of the burden is fallen on them, and we really appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on the consent calendar or questions from the commissioners? Is there any public comment on the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, is there, oh, there was? Okay, is there a motion?
Yeah, I move approval of the consent calendar, items 3 through 63, with the omission of item 4.
I'll second.
Commissioner Odero,
Yes.
Commissioner Kasher,
Yes.
Commissioner Wasserman,
Yes.
Commissioner Nguyen,
Yes.
Chair Remke.
Yes.
This motion passes.
Great. Okay, so let's take up item 4. Would you like to start, Commissioner Wasserman?
Well, sure. I do not have a material financial interest in this particular item. However, the entity that the candidate was seeking a position on is a longtime client, so I just feel more comfortable abstaining.
Okay, well, I will have a little bit more of a substantive question for you, Ms. West. And I'm just curious because this is a default matter. And as we've talked about in the past, you know, we really need to kind of look at why we would give anything other than a full fine on a default matter. So I know that there were 4 reports in total, one for the LA Community College Board, which that statement was ultimately filed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but then the 3 reports for the state assembly position have still not yet been filed.
Correct.
So I guess I would say I could see why perhaps having ultimate compliance on the LA issue, we could give what we normally look at as more like along the $2,000 fine range. But as far as the other 3, I have a harder time understanding, at least based on this, why we are giving them a break and not going 15,000.
And that's it's a valid need of understanding for this point. What happened in this case is we have a candidate who is a perpetual candidate. He'll file a 501 and then nothing else and run for a race without having any further filings. And so for the first race for the community college, he raised and spent less than $1,000 and filed the 470 after being requested many times. But for the assembly race, he never filed anything. He received less than 1,400 votes, and he was indicating to us that he raised or spent less than $1,000, but yet wouldn't say that because stopped communicating, obviously, and wouldn't file the 470. So what happens under the act is the 470 is something that's under the control of the candidate. So in order for you to affirmatively say that you're doing less than $1,000, you file the 470, but it's not up to us to charge you for not filing a 470. We have to assume that you have activity that causes you to file pre-elections and semi-annuals. So therefore, he gets 3 charges of semi-annuals and pre-elections instead of 2 470s, one for the community college and one for the assembly race. So we really are kind of throwing the book at him because we have to charge him for the 3 statements as opposed to the one we suspect that he needed to file had he cooperated and filed it. So that's why the fine is as it is. But as you know, the commission does have discretion to raise default fines.
I guess I just have a problem with, again, so we're suspecting based on comments, but yet he hasn't had the courtesy to step forward and either file the 470 and put it to rest, and then he'd probably be looking at $4,000 or less of a fine or some kind of statement here and appearing. So I don't know. I'm wondering what the other commissioners think.
I had a similar comment, and I actually had a conversation with Galena on this point before this meeting about, I just go nuts when someone refuses to cooperate, refuses to communicate, and we end up in a default situation. And I always want a higher fine too, although, reading through this, I mean, the chances of us collecting even the fine that, we've imposed seem, unlikely. I'm wondering if we could somehow maybe go back to the drawing board and see if we could get him to file his statement and impose a lower fine rather than keep, upping the dollar amount, which, is unlikely to be collected. So I'd appreciate your thoughts on that.
Actually, since I took over as chief, one of the major changes, as you know, with the Streamline program is file first before you get Streamline. So we've done much more reach out to respondents than we've ever done in order to try to get compliance, because obviously disclosure is the whole purpose. It's not about fining people. It's about getting them to disclose the information. And so we've doubled our efforts in that. And Mr. Aldapa is a perfect example of someone that the attorney I know has communicated with him quite a few times, and we do traces to try to find new numbers, and he actually dodges service. And we have had zero luck getting him to cooperate.
Which would be further reason, in my point of view, to up the fine. But I mean, I wouldn't want to push it back and ask them to do more work. I think they've done more than enough work on this case. Commissioner?
Yeah, I'll just offer, I tend to agree with the chair on this one. Notice has been provided multiple times. It sounds like, I mean, at this point, he's clearly trying to evade having to respond. And it's the authority that we have here is just to impose the maximum penalty. And if that's all that we can do to get him to comply, then I think we should, have the maximum.
So are you looking at the 17,000, so 5,000 each for 2, 3, and 4, and then 2,000 for 1? The one where he did file the statement?
Right.
That's what I would be
Yeah.
proposing.
And that's fair. And
Commissioner Odero?
Yes, so I agree with the chair. Also, I don't know, as you're saying, I don't know that reaching out to him any more than you already have is going to do any good. But there is, for the 2013 violation, he did have a prior record, right? Didn't he have, wasn't there something in 2012 where he was fined? I thought I read that. Am I mistaken about that?
Just a sec. I do recall reading that, but
Well, in any event, I do believe that the 2013 fine is fine as it is, but I do think that all three of 2014 should be increased.
Okay, so I'll move to approve item 4 for a $17,000 fine.
Second.
Commissioner Odero?
Yes.
Commissioner Wasserman?
Abstain.
My apologies. Commissioner Kasher?
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn?
Yes.
Chair Remke?
Yes.
This motion passes.
thank you. And we'll take
Thank
that
you,
direction
Ms.
in the
West.
future.
Oh. Okay, so item 64, and Ms. Wagner is going to lead us on this.
Okay. Good morning. Hyla Wagner with the Legal Division, General Counsel. The regulations up for the Commission's consideration this morning are proposed amendments to the independent expenditure regulations in Section 18225.7 and 18550.1. And the goals of this regulation project are limited. They are to clarify what the term "made at the behest" means as used in the Act, and to consolidate these two overlapping regulations, and to update the presumptions of coordination. The regulation is intended to cover the same scope of communications that were previously covered by regulations 18225.7 and 18550.1. There's no intention in this project to expand the scope of communications covered. As you know, independent expenditures are expenditures made by outside groups, individuals, or entities that are not connected with the candidate's campaign. All the contributions to state candidates must be made under the Act's contribution limits of $4,200 per election for legislative candidates, $7,000 for statewide, and $28,200 for governor. But in contrast, there's no limit on the funds that an outside group may raise to make independent expenditures. So the distinction between expenditures made independent of a candidate and those made at the behest of or coordinated with a candidate is important. If the funds raised by an outside group are spent at the behest of or in coordination with a candidate, the expenditures are deemed to be contributions and they're subject to the contribution limits. Regulation 18225.7 defines what made at the behest of or coordination means, and it provides guidance to candidates and to those making independent expenditures, and contains presumptions for certain situations when expenditures will be presumed to be coordinated with a candidate. It also contains a list of safe harbors for when an expenditure will not be considered to be coordinated with a candidate. The presumptions in the regulation have always been rebuttable, and we've added language to make that abundantly clear. For an expenditure by an outside group to be coordinated with a candidate, there must in fact be actual coordination and communication between the candidate or their agents and the outside group. So questions of coordination are always very intense factual questions. California's current coordination rules are strong, and we're proposing to update them to keep pace with new strategies being used by outside groups. Under the proposed amendments, an outside group's spending is presumed to be coordinated with the candidate and not independent in the following situation. The first involves common consultants. An expenditure will be presumed to be coordinated where the outside group and the candidate use the same political consultants. This is an existing presumption and probably the most important coordination presumption. And here we propose that the presumption should extend to the primary and the general election combined, rather than apply to each election separately as it does now. The next new presumption involves fundraising. An expenditure will be presumed to be coordinated where an outside group is primarily formed to make independent expenditures on a candidate, and the candidate participates in fundraising for the group by soliciting funds or appearing as a speaker at its fundraiser. The third one involves former staffers. An expenditure will be presumed to be coordinated where the outside group is established or run by former staff members of the candidate during a certain limited time period. And another presumption that will apply where the outside group is established or principally funded by family members of the candidate, immediate family members. So these additions to the Act's presumptions of coordination are proposed to strengthen the coordination rules and ensure that independent expenditures made from unlimited funds are truly separate and independent from the candidate. The proposed regulation is a solid package. It covers the same communications as the current regulation. It adds some common sense presumptions of coordination, and it clarifies the Act's use of the term made at the behest and deletes a duplicative regulation. The Commission has received a lot of thoughtful and spirited comments on this regulation, which have been very helpful, and we've incorporated suggestions from many of them into the final proposal.
Can I jump in? And
Mhm.
just so when you say that, because this has been amended, I just want to make sure when we go forward and you talk about any other proposed changes that we're all on the same page, and everyone here and all the commissioners are working off the October 14th version. And if you don't have it and you'd like to see it with blue and red, which shows the two sets of amendments that have occurred since this was released, Jacob's in the back of the room with red and blue copies, just raise your hand and he'll pass them out. But I just want to make sure, because I know that Hyla is going to suggest some changes, and I want to make sure everyone is on the same version. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good. Everyone's got a copy. Because we were going to propose adding two phrases just to clarify on the point that the scope of the communications covered by the proposed regulation is the same as the old regulation. That question came up kind of in the context of the Brennan Center and the Campaign Legal Center's comments about what communications the regulation covers. It essentially governs coordination in the context of independent expenditures under Section 82031, and also for a smaller group of communications, the so-called issue advocacy communications identifying a state candidate under Section 85310. So we just like to add, and some CPAA members were asking us questions about that. So we wanted to clarify at the end of paragraph 1 on page 1, it's one of the other uses of the term made at the behest. We wanted to add at the very end on line 10, the language and then put a little for. So made at the behest is used also, and little I for communications identifying a state candidate as specified in Section 85310, period. And also on page 2, in paragraph C there, line 5, again, to clarify that this covers independent expenditures and those issue advocacy communications, we want to put some of that language back in, say, for purposes of sections 82031, 85500, and 85310, comma, an expenditure is made at the behest. So just putting that back in to clarify the scope of the communications covered.
I'm sorry, can you
Sure.
repeat the language that we're adding to line 10 on page 1?
Sure. So then it would read, okay, we'll go up. It's covering, we'll delete the and before behested payments. The term is used for behested payments reports filed by an elective officer, et cetera, as specified in 82015, B2B, comma, and parentheses, little Roman 4, IV, for communications identifying a state candidate as specified in section 85310.
And again, the whole purpose of this is to just confirm and alleviate any concerns that we were somehow sneakily attempting to broaden the existing regulation. And in fact, that this just applies as it does under existing law to these communications.
Correct.
And then you're going to delete the and on line 8 before small Roman numeral 3.
Correct. Thank
And
you.
we're going
Thank
to
you.
put on line 4 is used in for context in the.
Oh, that's correct. For context.
So I think it
Okay.
does two really smart things. Number one, one of the goals of the regulation was to clarify the use of this term made at the behest, which I find incredibly frustrating and tedious. But so then there are 4 times, 4 very different meanings. Here they are, but within the context of made at the behest, this is what they mean. So I think that's a great first step, and I really appreciate that work.
Okay, and with that, I would like to turn it over to comments from,
We're going to go for
Commissioners and
us
speakers.
first, if you don't mind. Commissioners,
Okay,
Commissioner Wasserman?
thank you. Page 3, first paragraph, first line. After discussion between the creator, it might be better just a creator, because you may have multiple creators, producers, or distributors.
Hmm.
So
That's all.
that's all I have my comment to that. Moving down to section D, just a clarification. Rebuttable presumption. If we don't have that word in there, it's unclear that it's rebuttable presumption.
well, we think it is clear that it's rebuttable and
Just trying to be
it's always
clearer.
been rebuttable. Yeah, we just, at the request of the political attorneys, the CPAA, you know,
They
Okay.
wore us down.
we just want to be very
Well,
clear.
that looked like a negotiated term.
But
Like
it's
when you're
always
looking at a
been-
contract saying, why did we need,
But-
oh, just someone just wanted to make sure it was
We
very
just
clear.
want to
it
make
was
sure
rebuttable.
in case
We're
someone,
really, really sure now it's rebuttable.
but it has always been interpreted as rebuttable. They've always been rebuttable.
And,
They have to
and,
be.
and the burden of persuasion or burden of proof, burden of production, any burden we have are to rebut that presumption are at what level then? Same as,
It's to provide affirmative facts to show that there was no coordination.
and then it's gone. Okay. I want to move on to page 5. And this is actually more, maybe perhaps a more involved question. Former staff. So initially it said 12 months prior, and I've seen the comment letters about this. Is it, as it stands, is this essentially a lifetime ban then?
No, it's just because we adopted the time period on the current campaign. So that's starting before the primary, 12 months before the primary. So it just seemed to make sense to take the same standard.
Worked in a senior position within the current campaign
So within that 12 months before the primary.
So it's the same concept,
So
Yeah.
that's not stricken out. That's
but we
underlined.
changed current campaign to mean 12 months before the primary to the election date. So now we're just using that term throughout as rather than
Have
repeat
to
it.
have-
Yeah.
2 different time periods, yeah.
So we just wanted one time period that we use. So the presumption only applies from 12 months prior to the primary to the election date.
And that's how current campaign is defined?
Yes.
Yes, it's
Is that
Defined-
previously?
Yeah.
in agent, it's not,
Oh, I see.
yeah, it's
The
not the
definition
most
was in-
beautiful
under
place for
agent.
Yeah,
it. but
page 3, starting at line
21.
21. I would say some people are advocating that 12 months prior to the primary is not long enough. So again, somewhat of a compromise, and we'll see how that plays out over the next election.
Right. Yeah. Right. Because as a practical matter, if you're planning well and you're getting into an election, 12 months, well, 12 months
Blink
is
of the eye.
probably a late start, but it happens all the time as well, and
Mhm.
things do change. Okay. And in case I missed it, defined elsewhere, senior position or advisory capacity on candidate or office holder staff. Do we have a definition for the advisory capacity, or do we know what that necessarily means? I mean, a finance committee member, and this, let me step back a second. When we say candidate or office holder staff, is that defined as the staff of the current office, the staff of the campaign, the staff of the candidate's company, an employee?
Well, it says candidate or office holder staff. Right?
So it would include their campaign or their elective office staff.
But since it's staff, not employees of, say, their business.
But it's staff of their office or, I guess I'm
If you're a candidate, if you're a candidate and you have a business.
So candidate A is an incumbent council member running for state assembly. They have staff. Maybe they have a staff with their council. In
Mhm.
this case, let's say they do.
Mhm.
They have campaign staff. They also are a business owner, and they own a hotel or something.
Mhm.
And some employee of theirs becomes involved in whatever this process was. Are we talking? Is that employee's involvement fall under this clause? Are we talking purely about
Campaign or
public
elected
official type
officials.
staff or campaign staff?
You're talking about the candidate or the office holder
Yeah, I think the
staff.
public
And
official
I mean, I don't,
staff,
on the
candidate or
candidate's
office holder.
staff or the office holder staff. Staff is modifying candidate or office holder. Do you want it to say or the staff of the candidate or office holder?
No, I just wanted a clarification.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's
no.
just the position of the candidate's office or the
Right.
office holder. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
That's fine. I think that's it for me. And I guess the next one down, number 7 on 5, immediate family member, which I believe we probably have defined all over the place. Same definition.
Yes, we have that defined in the act.
I'm looking forward to hearing everything else. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Another Commissioner Kasher?
I just had a general comment and wanted to thank staff for your work on this. I know that this is, a lot of work went into this. I also wanted to thank all of the regulated community and everybody who submitted comment letters. There were a number that were received. We definitely read all of them, and the feedback was very useful. So thank you guys for all of your time on this, and no substantive comments at this point, but I'd like to hear from the general public. And
Commissioner Wynn?
Thanks so much. I just have a general comment also. I'd like to just piggyback on Eric's comments about, great work, and thanks to the regulated community for really giving us helpful input. I just was wondering, so we have incorporated a number of the changes made, in response to letters. So was that through the process of interested party meetings, or was it just kind of as things came in, we reacted?
Yes, well, it was first through, initially we had an interested persons meeting and got an initial set of comments. And then we started getting the comment letters and incorporating some ideas from them. And we had a meeting with some CPAA representatives were expressing some views on that.
So would you call those interested persons meetings also thoughtful and spirited? I mean, what was it, real collaboration in developing this?
Later down the road, it happens a little bit later.
I feel like she's just giving
That-
me a
it
lead
got
into my little
started.
speech I'm about to give.
Gets started at the
I'm
IP
probably going to
meeting.
give the same speech, but I'm going to let
Yeah.
the chair give it.
Yeah.
It's just very hard to get letters late
Yeah.
Wednesday evening for a Thursday. But when we're supposed to be thoughtful also, it would be nice to have a little time to ruminate on this really complex issue area.
I
leave it
appreciate
at that.
that, yes, Commissioner Wynn. And we have discussed this internally, and we are trying to spread the word externally as well. When we send out notice of an interested persons meeting with the language 45 days prior to today, I believe it is 45 days, right? Yeah, 45 days ago, we're stressing that that is our product. That is what we consider our best effort at what we are going to be presenting today. And so I strongly encourage all interested persons to show up at that meeting with their concerns, because, we are trying to accommodate it as it goes through the process. And we have been meeting with people up until the last minute because we want to bring forward to everyone here the best compromise, taking into consideration. But it really leads to a problematic situation where I'm concerned we're not going to have the best product sometimes because we're making changes too late in the game. So again, for the world, the IP meeting is the real deal. If you have comments, you need to get them in at that point. And, I'm going to start discouraging staff from doing all these last minute, we'll take your calls, we'll have meetings, because there is an opportunity. We want to hear from you. We need to hear from you, but we need to hear from you in a timely manner. Thanks. So now come up. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners before we hear public comment? Okay, let's start with public comment.
Morning, Chair, Benke, and Commissioners.
Good morning.
I'm Trudy Schaefer, representing the League of Women Voters of California. And I am one of those people with a very late comment. Repeat, I'm Trudy Schaefer, representing the League of Women Voters of California. And we strongly support your efforts and urge you to adopt these amendments to the regulation.
We'll take those late kind of comments, though. That's good.
And I do apologize. I've been out of the country, in fact, and I failed to note either my name as the representative of the league or the name of our president, Helen Hutchison, but these do represent the League of Women Voters of California. I won't trouble you with the extent of what we wrote, but you know that through the years, the League of Women Voters nationally has supported that the methods of financing political campaigns should ensure the public's right to know, combat corruption and undue influence, enable candidates to compete more equitably for public office, and allow maximum participation in the political process. It is very important. Thank you. Is this better? Yes. Since outside groups can receive unlimited contributions, of course, it's crucial that their activities not be coordinated with a candidate's campaign, which would serve as a way to evade California's contribution limits. The Supreme Court's interpretation in Citizens United and other cases requires true independence if those contributions to the outside groups are to be unlimited. And thus, we really support these clear, robust criteria for establishing independence that are in the proposed amendments. As your memo indicates, there are in the Brennan Center report numerous examples of abuses and coordination that have occurred all across the country and at the federal level. And we appreciate that the memo cites that there are some examples already of issues that have been raised in California. And so we think it's very important that these amendments which we consider timely and needed in order to crack down on contributions that, coordination that might occur, and we do not want them to become prevalent in our state. So we applaud you for your leadership in suggesting these important safeguards, and we hope they will be in place before the 2016 elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment.
Good morning, Chair Remke and Commissioners. My name is Paul Ryan. I'm Senior Counsel at the Campaign Legal Center in Washington, D.C. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning before you. We submitted written comments that more fully detail our position, our view, and our support for these proposed regulations. I just want to touch on a couple of substantive matters that I think are worth highlighting. But first of all, as you all know, the Supreme Court in Citizens United in 2010 unleashed a flood of unlimited money in our elections. And the court promised two things. The court said, don't worry, America, don't worry, Californians. This money isn't going to corrupt our elections because it will be independent of candidates. They also said that this money would all be transparent, so voters could hold their elected officials accountable. The FPPC has led the way nationally on fighting for transparency of this money in elections post-Citizens United. I'm referring most specifically to the enforcement matter entailing the Center to Protect Patients' Rights and Americans for Responsible Leadership. That was activity to be commended. And now the FPPC is further exhibiting its leadership qualities by taking the lead nationally on this question of coordinated versus independent spending. So I applaud the FPPC for this leadership. The people of California are fortunate to have you. And I also want to make one point abundantly clear. I believe, my colleagues at the Campaign Legal Center believe that all of the proposals, all of the elements of this proposal before you today are constitutionally permissible. There's no doubt in our view that this stuff is constitutionally permissible, and it will be vitally important to maintaining the integrity of California's contribution limits. The Supreme Court has upheld candidate contribution limits. The Supreme Court, in referring to independent spending, has repeatedly used phrases including totally independent, wholly independent, truly independent. I believe that this regulation will take great strides to ensuring that this money is in fact, these expenditures are in fact totally, wholly, truly independent. The Supreme Court in McConnell v. FEC upheld restrictions on candidates and office holders soliciting money for outside groups, the so-called soft money ban of the McCain-Feingold law. And California is not alone if, in fact, it decides to regulate fundraising as a form of coordination. The state of Minnesota does so, the state of Connecticut does so, and I would be very pleased to see California join that group. Two substantive issues. One is the scope of the ads covered by this coordination regulation. It remains unclear to me under both 18225, the underlying regulatory definition of expenditure, as well as the amendments that have been proposed at the table today, the inclusion of additional references to statutory sites, precisely what types of ads get covered by this new coordination rule. I don't think I'm going to necessarily gain clarity on that at the podium at this moment. So instead, I want to just share with you what I think is the permissible scope of regulation of coordinated activities. The rule certainly covers express advocacy and what California refers to as communications unambiguously urging a particular result, which on the broader national scale, election lawyers might refer to that as the functional equivalent of express advocacy. It's a very similar test that's appeared in a couple of Supreme Court decisions. I believe that California could and should go further to cover any ads that are coordinated with a candidate if they clearly identify a candidate within a certain time frame of an election. And I've looked at both the statutes here in California and the underlying definition of expenditure, which has a pre-election mention a candidate time frame, but it seems to me to be modified by an unambiguously urges qualification, and I don't think that's necessary. And when you're outside of those timeframes, I think the state of California can and should go further than simply covering express advocacy and its functional equivalent. The PASO standard that was in the McCain-Feingold law and approved by the Supreme Court with respect to political parties in McConnell v. FEC, that is to say ads that promote, attack, support, or oppose candidates, is one good option, I think, for regulating the types of ads, the content of ads, when they are aired after collaboration or interaction between candidates and outside groups. So I would urge the FPPC to consider regulating passive communications and communications that simply mention candidates in close proximity to an election. The constitutionality of these proposals are detailed in our written comments, so I'll leave it at that. The final issue I want to raise is the fundraising prong of this proposed rule. I think it is an excellent and invaluable addition to California's regulations. Without it, California's candidate contribution limits, I believe, are rendered meaningless. The $4,200 limit on how much you can give to a candidate for assembly or state senate is meaningless if that same individual can ask for a $50,000 contribution to a super PAC that's set up to support that individual's candidacy. So I'm glad to see it in here. What I'm wondering is why it will be limited to groups primarily formed to support a candidate. I think there are groups that are active on the national stage that could rebut any argument that that is their primary purpose. Groups like the Democratic Governors Association. This is an issue that has been raised and litigated in Connecticut, where Connecticut Governor Malloy raised millions of dollars for DGA. And DGA turned around and said, we want to spend this money to support Governor Malloy's re-election. And we want the state to deem it an independent expenditure. Governor Malloy was participating in a public financing system. The credibility of that public financing system, I believe, was undermined by his ability to raise millions of dollars for DGA that was spent on his behalf. So I would encourage you to reconsider limiting this fundraising provision only to groups that are primarily formed to support the specific candidate. One final issue is pre-candidacy activities, or simply fundraising by individuals who deny that they're a candidate. We saw on the national stage earlier this year, Jeb Bush denying for the first half of this year that he was running for president, while he raised $100 million in unlimited contributions for a super PAC called Right to Rise. I understand that California's law defining when someone becomes a candidate is a little bit different than the federal law. I'm not convinced that it's sufficiently different to eliminate this possibility altogether. And you are the experts on California law, so I would love to hear encouragement or assurances that no, as soon as someone, even if someone is denying that they're running for federal office or running for state office, if they start raising money for a super PAC, it would be covered by this coordination provision. Another way to go about it is just to make a small amendment in the rule to clarify that this applies to fundraising prong not only to candidates, but individuals who become candidates in the same election cycle. I will leave it at that. I would welcome any questions you might have. And again, I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. You've raised a lot of issues. Again, I think that some of the issues are about going beyond what we're proposing today, and maybe perhaps we can bring some of those back at another time. But right now, yeah, we're trying to make it perfectly clear the scope of this staying within what we already addressed with the presumptions, but taking the presumptions further, as you say, to address those issues that are out there. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good.
Good morning, Commissioners. Matthew Alvarez with the Sutton Law Firm.
Is that working? I can't
Can
hear you. Is that-
everyone hear me?
Yeah, there
Is
it's
that-
better.
is
You
that
gotta go
better?
right to your
Closer.
mouth.
Okay. So we've been trying to figure out exactly what this regulation changes, and we've come to the conclusion that it really doesn't do much, if anything. And we posit
It sounds like a challenge.
no, not a challenge, just a declarative statement. We posit for the Commission's consideration that the current regulations are not just sufficient, but they're actually quite effective at policing illegal coordination within California. The current public discussions going on predominantly surround activities of candidates for president going on right now, Jeb Bush, as was just mentioned, Hillary Clinton, et cetera, and certain activities in other states, Connecticut, Florida being the ones that are mentioned the most. But in the public discourse, there is a lack of mention of issues involving illegal coordination within California. And I think the reason for that is because the current regulations are quite strong and do send a clear message of what is and what isn't allowed. Nonetheless, I think there is an assumption that if presidential candidates are getting away with certain things, then certainly candidates for lesser office are getting away with the same things. And then I think there's an impulse there to pass new regulations, such as the Commission's doing right now, in order to lead the nation as it's been doing for the past decade and a half since the original coordination rules were passed. The truth of the matter is on the ground that with California having been leading this issue for the past 13, 15 years, the new presumptions that are added don't really change anything. If a candidate fundraises before announcing for the actual office that they're seeking, or if a candidate goes and fundraises for a super PAC that is supporting his or her candidacy, the FPPC would have no problem, and it has in the past, bringing an enforcement matter and effectively going after that candidate. If a former campaign staffer or office holder staffer uses non-public information and uses that information to produce independent expenditures, the FPPC has in the past had no problem bringing enforcement matters and going after those candidates. So at the end of the day, I think additional presumptions sound great, but truly on the ground, presumptions are not worth much more than the paper that they're written on, because if the commission doesn't have actual proof, some type of smoking gun, an email, a telephone record, an admission that a true communication was coordinated, then the presumption doesn't do any good. So I just think that perhaps the more prudent back into more further identify what we're truly trying to solve, instead of just perhaps passing regulations for regulation's sake. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I would just agree that California has been out in front of this issue, obviously longer than at the federal level, because we had the issue of independent expenditures longer. We've faced it, we've attacked it. And I think the purpose of these is to maintain the highest standards that we have by focusing on the new issues and areas we hear. So thank you, but I think we're just moving us one step closer to where things are at now. Thank you.
Morning, Madam Chair. Members of the Commission, Richard Rios from Olson, Hagel, and Fishburne. I first wanted to thank the chair. I first wanted to thank the chair and the staff and the other commissioners for making improvements in this regulation, or this draft or proposed regulation. We've come a long way from where we started. We did start at the IP meeting. Several members of our firm, lawyers at our firm, were in attendance at the IP meeting and offered substantive feedback at the IP meeting. However, we understand the direction of the chair and the commissioners, and will inform CPAA of the chair's desire and make sure that the IP meetings are taken seriously, and that our members are in attendance and responding and providing constructive feedback. So again, Madam Chair, first of all, hats off to the staff and to you for really digging into an issue area that's very difficult to regulate in. And there's lots of competing interests, both between First Amendment speech and what should be regulated. And so we think that you've done an effective job of taking into consideration all of those concerns. So thank you. With respect to the amendments that were made today, I would just like to offer one question with respect to the PIN site or with respect to the citation in 85-310. I was privy to some of the conversation or to some of the concerns about the issue advertisements that take place in 85-310. And I thought that the concern was making the behest, the term at the behest or made at the behest, applicable to the entire section of 85-310, and that the term made at the behest of is contained only in subdivision C. So I'm not sure if the amendments were intended only to apply to the term made at the behest, which is contained in subdivision C, and we'd like to offer that if that was not the intent.
That is the intent, because that's the only place the term is used in
That's
that
right.
section.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's subdivision C. We're trying to get away from being that really precise. I was holding back on even adding in the section, because I think then you got to be careful every time a section changes. All of a sudden C becomes D, but it is going to subdivision C.
Okay, so you don't feel that the addition of subdivision C in the reference to
I would be
85-310 is necessary?
fine with that. I'll leave that to Ms. Wagner to respond to.
Yeah, we can, that's the only place subdivision C where made at the behest is used. Just like the other, we could have 85-500 85-310B and 85-310C, or you can we just went with this
The section
statute,
to bring
the
you to
section.
the issue of advocacy. So again, unless we start going back and re-going through, putting subsections in throughout, should we just, I think we'll leave it as is, but we are confirming that since that's the only place the term appears, that's the issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only other comment, again, we think that the regulation has come a long way. The one kind of area we'd point you to, and you referenced it earlier, Madam Chair, about whether the 12-month period is too long in the definition of current campaign.
No, I said whether it's long enough.
That's well. I think reasonable minds may differ on that point, and so I just wanted to offer that term is a very long time in advance of the election. It's the analogous period under federal law is 120 days, which is closer to four months. The candidate filing period actually doesn't occur with respect to the primary election until March. And so, as a typical matter, the communications strategies don't formulate, at least in my experience, until much, much closer to the election. And so I would just offer that the 12-month period seems like a very, very long time in the campaign world. I know, the campaign world moves fast. So I just wanted to offer that as constructive feedback on the regulations. We would support an amendment if the commission was willing to entertain one to limit that period to coincide with the federal period of 120 days. But again, Madam Chair, we think overall the regulation has undergone substantial improvements. We appreciate the commission's efforts here, and thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback.
Thank you. Any additional public comment?
Hello, my name is Kevin Wolf. I am the chair of the California Clean Money Action Fund. There is, overall, the message is that if there's a loophole, they'll find it. There's so much power to be made out of winning an election. Developers of properties spending $2 million to develop land on the south of Highway 50, contributing to ballot measures. There's enormous amounts of money at stake. They're going to find loopholes. And we are encouraging you, and we appreciate what you've done here to close some of these loopholes. But loopholes are still there. You run for assembly, you lose. You spend the next 2 years working on your assembly race. 12 months beforehand. Now you're working years and years before your race to prepare. You're a mayor of a city council. You're making decisions on whether a big development comes in. Somebody offers you $50,000 in an expenditure campaign. It's 2 years before your race for assembly. You're going to collude on those things. We think you're going to need to tighten this. We think you should come back next year and look at all the ways that they tried to slip around all these loopholes and do it again and tighten them again, because they are going to find your loopholes and try to wiggle their way through them. There's too much at stake on this. So we think you did a great job in moving these things forward, but we think you're going to have to come back year after year and continue to try to figure out a way to not let this power of money corrupt our democracy. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Wynn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wolf. Can you use your crystal ball and predict what you think the biggest loophole, in this proposal right now?
So let's see, senior staff or their people on their boards of candidates. I'm a volunteer. I'm not on staff. I sit in all those meetings, but I don't have a title. I'm not a staff person. I'm a volunteer. I then go over to the Super PAC's campaign and give them everything, hear from them. I walk back. I don't have a title. I think you should say anybody who volunteers with a campaign cannot collude. If you're a volunteer, what does that mean? I help the campaign. An hour, you volunteered. You cannot collude. But right now you can collude. There's no restriction on that.
Well, again, there's no presumption. It doesn't mean that coordination wouldn't be found.
Yes, but you're going to have a hard time finding that. And so if you just make it strictly, if you volunteer, you cannot go in and collude, and we find you in that meeting over there with the Super PAC, and you're also volunteering in the campaign, then you violated the rules. And then you'll have volunteers say, I don't want to violate the rules, I won't do that. But right now, the rules are allow you to violate them. Because that no penalty to me as a volunteer to go do that. I'll just do the collusion for you.
Commissioner Wasserman?
Sir, so then do I take it that you're arguing for an irrebuttable presumption? Because that's what that sounds like you're saying.
I think that you need to find ways in which you stop this collusion that goes on between these independent expenditure campaigns and candidates. And that you're going to, this is a good step in the right direction, but it's not going to stop it. And you're going to need to find ways to make it stricter until we overturn Citizens United, or until we stop the amount of independent expenditure money that flows into campaigns. I think you're the best shot we have of protecting our democracy from this huge amount of money that's being poured into winning elections.
Thank you, sir. Any additional public comment? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion on the regulation with the amendments proposed by Ms. Wagner as to adding the small 4 and these reference to the section numbers?
Madam Chair, before we do that, can we have some further discussion? Is that
Sure.
all right? So a couple of things that were brought up, and just for clarity, because we tend to refer to the regulation numbers, and we aren't talking actually about what they actually cover. We say, well, this regulation and that. One of the topics brought up was the scope of communications covered, and we have now, with the addition, we have 82. We added in 85.310, right? So I guess if there's a concern about scope from some parties, what is outside of this scope?
Well, what's in are, of course, it's the main regulation determining whether independent expenditures are coordinated or independent. And similarly, in the issue advocacy provision 85.310, that says if an issue ad is made at the behest of a candidate, then these contribution limits will apply. So it applies in that context. And that issue advocacy provision applies to ads clearly identifying a state candidate within 45 days of an election. If there's an ad outside that period, there was or issue advocacy speech mentioning a candidate outside that period, I guess there was a question, is that covered or not? And what our statute covers now is in 85.310, such ads 45 days within an election, clearly identifying a candidate.
Okay, and then we have some other statutes and regulations that are highly specific, like slate mailers that have their
Right.
own sort of exceptions.
That's right.
Because I recall, my concern about certain slate mailer activities and coordination and independent expenditures some time ago. So I'm trying to keep these things in place because they all are part of the overall picture, and how they work together is what we have to deal with.
And a lot of that just falls under the reference to the definition of independent expenditure, which would encompass all the issues of what's independent versus what's coordinated.
Thank you. The second issue of scope was brought up with respect to the scope of the groups covered. I think the example was the out-of-state governor's race, where someone raised money for the Democratic Governors Association. And what we have had in prior cases include things like county central committees, et cetera. And I just wanted to make sure that I'm completely clear that that really isn't changed in terms of scope. Those are still entities we're talking about. These are, but is that a fair statement by the speaker that this would not cover these other entities because they are not primarily formed for a particular purpose?
Well, I think he was saying if a candidate's going to speak, say at the political party or at a general purpose committee, that it's not primarily formed to make IEs on that candidate, then the fundraising presumption wouldn't apply.
Right.
And that's accurate as it is. That's correct. His statement is correct. We've made it to more narrow and just see how that goes and then see if it needs to be expanded.
So it's really just a matter of presumptions because
Yes.
as we've indicated before,
Right.
it wouldn't necessarily change some cases we had previously where
That's correct.
the evidence was produced
Right.
that led to the conclusion that there was coordination, and some of that was based on the particular circumstances of a fundraising appearance at a central committee or whatnot.
Right.
Okay. And I just, as a comment, it's just interesting that the different perspectives as to whether this proposal for this updated regulations really toughens things or makes no change, etc. And with respect to the presumptions, I think that's really a helpful clarification to understand where we're going and how we're presenting things. I think the real question will be, though, as the speaker indicated, is what do you present in response to that presumption? If there's a staff member that falls within this criteria, do they submit a declaration, indicating I did not convey any information, and the credibility determination of that declaration, and how do we end up dealing with it? I'm just trying to think about how we're dealing with these things down the road. Though it may be actually that it's really more of a deterrent effect to have the presumption in place, because I know that in certain instances, usually when folks have approached me and I've said, no, don't talk to me about it, go get an opinion or make a call, those are the folks who are already probably less likely to try to play games with this sort of thing anyway. And that were my comments and questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Wynn?
Thanks very much to the staff and to the members of the audience that provided really helpful commentary on this. I think that we've come to a good spot. I think there is some guessing involved in this. I don't know if 12 months is the right amount of time. It seems like a good place to start. 4 months seems very short. I don't know what the right number is, but I think 12 months is a good place to start. And I would also say, I think it's kind of a guess on how you define staff or employees. Are they volunteers or are they paid? I don't know how you could write a reg that would cover every situation that you want to cover. But I do think that these regulations are improved by the ongoing conversation. So I do appreciate how much time and effort both staff and the regulated community have put into that. And with that said, I'm ready to make a motion if we're in a position to do that at this point.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'd like to move approval of the staff's recommendations on this regulation.
Second.
Commissioner Darrow?
Yes.
Commissioner Kasher?
Yes.
Commissioner Wasserman?
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn?
Yes.
Chair Remke?
Yes.
This motion passes.
Thank you, Hyla.
Yeah, nice job.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're going to go off the record and have the closed session. Although I'm getting a sign that that's not what we're doing,
No,
but I
no,
think we're
that's
going to go ahead. We're going to go off the record. It should be a brief closed session, and then we'll come back and have the staff reports. Okay, thank you.
What are you gonna do? You're gonna Congratulations. The aftermath, but you've been thank you very much.
Oh, no.
Thank you. And thank
Thanks for hooking us up. Yes, yes.
Okay, so we're back on the record, and that was a closed session to deliberate on litigation issues, and there is nothing to report out of that. So we'll move to the last item, which are the staff reports. And do the commissioners have any questions or comments on the staff reports? If not, we can submit them.
I really believe that Linda Cassidy should have to report in great detail on what she's been doing this past month.
Well, that's a great lead-in because at the end of the staff reports, we are going to speak to Linda Cassidy's retirement, which is something we all are very sad to see happen, but understand 100%. So Linda, if you can come up, and Aaron, you're going to...
I said no
You can
party.
sit down.
I said no
Look,
party.
and I'm sorry, I messed up the order. The whole room should have been full for you, and so everyone can appreciate all the hard work you've done for us, Linda, and how much you will be missed.
Yeah, despite our best efforts to send her out in grand style with a ginormous party, Linda refused to. We did at least convince her to have executive staff go out to lunch last week. So we had a very nice lunch, and yeah, she made us get back to work after an hour. But as the chair said, the commission, and on behalf of the commission and its staff, we're very jealous of the plans that Linda has made for her retirement, which includes running a half marathon this weekend and heading off to Paris directly thereafter. And so she was making us very jealous with all her travel plans and all her plans. But I know I speak for all of us just when we say that you'll be greatly missed, and your expertise has been invaluable to all of us. And so we have a resolution, which I'm going to read to you, or read for everyone. So it's a resolution of the California Fair Political Practices Commission. The chair of the California Fair Political Practices Commission, pursuant to her statutory responsibility for the impartial and effective administration, implementation, and enforcement of the Political Reform Act of 1974, and in order to effectuate its purpose, does hereby resolve that Linda Cassidy is recognized and honored for her loyal and dedicated service to the Fair Political Practice Commission. Now let it be known to all that Linda Cassidy has been an outstanding public servant and an ambassador of the commission in her relationships with those subject to the Political Reform Act, including state and local elected officials, filing officers, and political attorneys and treasurers. And Linda Cassidy was instrumental in the drafting and consolidation of many of the numerous forms and instructional materials produced by the commission and used by state and local officials, candidates, office holders, and campaign committees, including the consolidation of Forms 721 and 730 into the current Form 700. And Linda Cassidy has helped implement comprehensive changes to the FPPC after voters approved Propositions 68, 73, 208, and 34, and oversaw 25 amendments to the Form 700 and created hundreds of conflict of interest disclosure categories. And Linda Cassidy has served under 5 gubernatorial administrations, 50 commissioners, and 10 commission chairs, working tirelessly the last 26 years to ensure the spirit of the Political Reform Act is realized, all to the great benefit of the commission, its staff, and the public interest. Therefore, be it resolved that the chair of the Fair Political Practices Commission, on behalf of its members, its staff, and the people of the state of California, which they serve, does hereby extend to Linda Cassidy its most sincere gratitude and appreciation for her loyal and selfless service, and its best wishes for continued success.
Yes. Go ahead, Commissioner Wynn.
Well, I can't believe you're going to run a marathon after doing all of those things, because I'm exhausted just reading about you. But, you know, as part of the regulated community for many decades, and then as a member for the last 2 years, I really want to tell you how much I've appreciated your help and support. I mean, it's been incredible to have somebody like you on staff, and we're going to miss you and wish you well.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was a pleasure working with you, and your contributions to the commission has been invaluable. So thank you very much, and best of luck with your retirement.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner
Yeah.
Kashner.
Go ahead.
Linda, I'd like to thank you professionally and personally for everything that you have done, not just for the commission, but for all of us as we came in and tried to get up to speed as quickly as possible. I really appreciated that you were always available to discuss things and took input with respect to areas where people were interested in more training or wanted more interaction. And I have to tell you, and I may have told you this before, but when I was going out that first year and just going around talking to people, city clerks and whatnot, you know, it was, if I had brought, you know, comment cards, but you would have gotten 10s down the line. So You will certainly be missed, and enjoy yourself.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So I just know you for a couple of hours.
I want to go on record. You did file your 700. We did have some conversations. Yes.
I was scared not to. No, but I have to say, what I have heard just in what was read is amazing, and I feel like I'm being gypped. As the new kid on the block, I miss out on what sounds to be the greatest teacher of all. So, but so be it. You leave behind, I see a lot of people who you have taught a lot of things to, and I will benefit from that. So I can only wish you a happy and long retirement.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And I'll just kind of tag on to Commissioner Wasserman. In addition to what he said when he goes out into the field already, the emails are coming in and the calls and the comments about how much everyone out there is going to miss you and what are we going to do without you. And we're still asking ourselves that. So we will try to figure it out, but we do thank you and wish you the best of luck.
Well, thank you. As I noted in my report, it's been a great 26 years. It's hard to believe that I've been here this long, and it just shows that the commission is a very special place. There's a special bond with the people who work here and who actually even leave here. I'm always met with open arms, no matter what party or what year they were here. And I don't think very many people in state service have that kind of relationship. And that's just a very good feeling. I took personality tests and they always came back as teacher. I go, I can't stand little kids. What would I possibly be a teacher for? And, you know, life brought me here. And so I've taught a lot of people about the Political Reform Act and all of its different, you know, laws, regulations, guides, and so forth. So it all worked out in the end. And I will miss it here. But I'm going to keep busy, and I'll be following you in the press, so there's no loopholes in the upcoming election. Thank you again for everything. Thank you, Aaron and Tyler.
Are there any other questions or comments on the reports? Commissioner Wynn?
Yes, and I'll make this very brief. Just on the legislative report, Suki, thank you very much. And Jody, thank you for the email about what was signed and vetoed. And I wondered, was there a veto message on AB 10? I know that it wasn't a bill we were supporting. It was a bill that we were following.
There was a veto message. It was similar. AB 10 was similar to a bill that was introduced a couple of years ago. The governor had vetoed, and he vetoed that bill because he felt that the disclosure categories on the Form 700 were adequate as they are. And the veto message that he had this time around was similar to that one. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the reports, or we can submit them? And then I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Commissioner Adara?
Yes.
Commissioner Kasher?
Yes.
Commissioner Wasserman?
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn?
Yes.
Chair Remke?